If you've ever heard Dr. King's
I have a dream
speech, then you're already partially familiar with this man. But I want to give some context first. Everyone watching this video is familiar with Rosa Parks, an act of direct civil disobedience when told to give up her seat on a bus. Very few are familiar with Claudette Colvin though, who did the exact same thing several months prior. Why? Because Claudette Colvin, despite being just as courageous as Rosa, had a considerably darker skin than Rosa and became pregnant at 16. Stay with me. This was a tactical move by the NAACP and other local groups. They knew that their odds of success on the civil rights front were much higher with a slightly older, not pregnant, light-skinned Rosa than Claudette. You could say this was messed up, or you could say you gotta do what you gotta do to force social change. It doesn't take much thinking to realize that countless stories like this exist. Most heroes of the civil rights movement have been forgotten by history, sometimes because of hard, tactical decisions like the Rosa and Claudette example. Just like Claudette, Bayard Rustin was another civil rights hero sidelined by both civil rights leaders as well as modern public thought. Not because he wasn't incredibly important, pregnant, or too black, but because of something both the United States and the civil rights movement viewed as much worse. The essential question, was the civil rights movement justified in hiding its damaged members to further the cause, or did it owe these figures public attention due to their contributions? By the end of the video, it'll make sense, despite his massive influence, why Rustin and figures like him are hidden from our textbooks. Long before Dr. King became a household name, Bayard Rustin was an active member of CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, and FOR, the Fellowship of Reconciliation, advocating for change through nonviolent resistance, surely influenced by the grandparents that raised him to understand the principles of pacifism and equality. Rustin was something of a pioneer in this approach to demanding equality in the 1940s, as nonviolence had not yet become mainstream.
Finally, one depends upon his body and his spirit. He puts that into breach when everything else fails. Because the man who believes in nonviolence is prepared to be harmed.
It was Rustin that organized the Journey of Reconciliation in 1947, an interracial nonviolent demonstration against segregated bus seating in which black riders sat in the front with white riders in the back. And despite ending in physical attacks and arrests, the Journey of Reconciliation was incredibly influential to some familiar events, like the 1955 Montgomery bus boycott and the 1961 Freedom Rides. As you'd imagine, the Journey of Reconciliation gave Rustin's name some weight. Enough weight that he would be invited by civil rights activist Asa Philip Randolph to meet Dr. King and advise him on strategy regarding the bus boycott, as well as teach King some of Rustin's own Gandhian principles, which directly influenced King on his path to becoming the full-scale nonviolent figure we see him as today. From the point of meeting him, Bayard Rustin played a major role in King's victories, as well as the victories of the movement as a whole, structuring public demonstrations, linking King to Union allies, expanding his reach beyond central Alabama, and editing King's speeches for him, sometimes even ghostwriting, allegedly. With all of this in mind, you'd like to think that Bayard Rustin would be a name close in recognition to a Rosa Parks or a John Lewis. But there were some serious problems with Rustin. If you're enjoying the video so far, hit the like button, comment for the algorithm, anything at all, and subscribe. It's not a secret newsletter thing and it doesn't sign you up for anything. It only helps my channel. Thank you. The first problem, and this is a big one, Rustin was a gay man. Not only this, but he was openly gay. Behind closed doors, the movement's leaders knew of this, but accepted him as a valuable asset nonetheless. That is, up until 1953. Where Rustin's sexuality went public after he was caught having an intimate encounter with two white men in a parked car, arrested and charged with lewd vagrancy. This was a strike not only to Rustin's reputation, but also to the civil rights movement as a whole, and put pressure on Dr. King especially. Do you distance yourself from the man with a gay sex crime on his record, or remain loyal to your close ally even during harsh times? This pressure was not simply generalized homophobia from the public, but it also originated from rival black leaders like Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Yes, you heard that right, rival black leaders. Powell in particular threatened to publicly accuse King of having a romantic relationship with Rustin if their close work together continued. Something about calling your political rival DL sounds humorously modern. Anyway, to make matters much worse, there was an additional problem with Rustin. He'd been active in some communist groups during the 30s and 40s, particularly for the efforts on the equality and civil rights fronts, and not so much for the economics aspect. But that detail was irrelevant to 1950s America. By the time he was arrested in 1953, the Second Red Scare was in full effect.
Escapers from communism spoke of miserable living conditions.
incessant economic pressures, and the constant fear of prison, deportation, or death.
Credible records of homosexuality and a communist background was plenty damning to any mid-20th century movement attempting to change the status quo. Directly speaking, a gay communist with influence was the perfect character to highlight in order to derail this movement. King did put space between himself and Rustin, fearing an obvious strike to his credibility, but the separation was temporary. After only a few years, Rustin was once again back in the public sphere voluntarily, with King personally crediting him for the successes of the civil rights movement, and Asa Philip Randolph, a prominent figure in his own right, keeping Rustin as his chief aide in the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, which is a dangerously funny name given the arrest circumstances, but that's low-hanging fruit. Rustin had once again earned the spotlight, receiving credit where credit was due, publicly by the early 1960s, and continued coordinating demonstrations from the civil rights movement, with maybe his most popular role being his work as lead organizer of the 1963 March on Washington, where King famously said,
"I have a dream."
So when you see Dr. King standing at the Lincoln Memorial giving his famous speech to over 250,000 people, remember that the entire event had Rustin's fingerprints on it. This photo in particular deserves some attention for its clear symbolism. It's as if it says, despite it all, Rustin remained behind the movement, even when it distanced itself from him, no different than the history books of today do. Past this point, Rustin continued his fight for justice, both foreign and domestic, on economic issues, school integration, early LGBTQ equality, and humanitarian concerns, up until his death in 1987. Despite his central role to the movement, history books shy away from his importance, primarily due to the same reasons he was sidelined during the civil rights movement. A homophobic climate at the tail end of the Cold War much preferred a sanitized version of reality in the classroom. So tell me in the comments, was the civil rights movement justified in putting Bayard Rustin away for a while to avoid a bad reputation? Or did it have a moral duty to keep him at the forefront of the movement at all times, since his contributions were vital to success? Thank you for watching, as always.